Down here, Vagabond Buddha. I'm in Hanoi, Vietnam. It's been a week and a day actually. We head to Hue next. Next Thursday. HUE is Hue. Anyways, you know I run, and when I'm running, if an idea comes that I want to share with you about present moment awareness, I share it, so I push record. Anyway, I was thinking about maybe the three things maybe that you could notice, and these are very nuanced, but you could put them into three categories if you want. There's thinking, which is what most people are noticing. They're noticing a stream of thoughts. And so there's often, it can be pictures, like a series of pictures that are going through your head about a situation. It could be like an analysis of something that you need to make a decision about. It could be noticing behavior of others. So it's sort of like you make observations and then you analyze the observations and come to decisions on action. And it can be any other kind of thought, like when maybe you're attracted to someone or something, and you look at them and you make some decision about what it is. It's their smile, it's their dimples. It's the human mind. The diversity of thinking is immense. And so that's something that most people pay attention to, and many or most people live in it like it's who they are. It receives present information that it's filtering as it walks along through life, and people that love to dance and do yoga and all sorts of things in Hanoi, and so that's what the background music is. I'm just walking through a beautiful park that surrounds a lake, and so that's the primary. I don't know if primary is the word. That's the state most people live moment by moment in. They're being a stream of consciousness, or a list of thoughts or things they're doing, or what they have to do next, or what they forgot to do, and well, they got to put that on a list. Got to fix this, got to do that next. Oh, I just remembered something I forgot. And they're living in this mind domain, which is they believe is directing their life, and it's indispensable. In fact, it is them. If that wasn't happening, they have a belief that if that wasn't happening, they wouldn't know who they are. Anyway, that's one thing that's a perception that you can observe. And in fact, the whole concept of observing that brings up the idea of watching. Like, you can watch what your mind's thinking, and that's maybe a step removed. Almost like when you sit and watch a movie, there's the movie that you're watching, and then there's you. And so those are two of the things that you can pay attention to. You can pay attention to the movie going on that you're watching, that your mind running through a stream of consciousness. And then you can pay attention to the being, if you will, that's watching the mind. And then there's a second thing you'll notice, and this is a little bit nuanced at first, but eventually you'll get it. And that's that some thoughts evoke emotion. And so you have 3 or 4 thoughts in a row that are more administrative in nature, something you need to do, remember, got to make that phone call. And then suddenly you'll have a thought that has an emotion attached to it, or the thought evokes an emotion, like something you remember you need to do has consequences attached. Oh, I need to make that phone call, and I need to go to lunch with, my boss or this person and smooth over some mess I made, because there's some risk there. I could lose my job, or the bills won't get paid, or excuse me. So there's emotions that attach to some feeling. So you'll notice that you have a stream of consciousness, some with very little emotion attached, and then a couple of ideas will come up. Or like during a breakup, every little thought you have has emotion attached to it. And that's not the same as remembering you need to do the laundry. Although everything feels more emotional after a breakup or a death or a job loss. Then you begin to imagine purpose and meaning and why is life this way. And often these are maybe emotional states almost that you go into where everything is painful or everything is happy. So you have emotions that are often evoked by thoughts. So you have that presence or being that's watching the movie or your life play out, and then when you have an emotion, positive or negative, or when you feel like your hormones are raging, and you feel like maybe more of a physical anger than a thought-provoked anger or upset or fear. That's more of a body-based or intuitive fear or anger or greed or jealousy, that kind of thing. So those are all kind of, so you have thoughts, then you have emotions, really. And they're both observed from a place of being. And then you have the place of being that's observing them. So there's actually a transitional state where you thought you were emotion. You thought you were a stream of thoughts. And suddenly you're able to have a little bit of space around it where where you realize that you're not actually your thoughts. But you can observe your thoughts, which means there's something bigger than your thoughts, which means you're bigger. You turn out to be more substantial, there turns out to be more to you than just your emotions and your thoughts. And so if you can imagine, emotions and thoughts are kind of a center part for most people. That's what they live in, and they think it is them. And then as you begin to be able to observe that you're actually having a stream of thoughts, and that you're actually, which thoughts are attaching emotions, and how that feels in your body, and which circumstances where your body is feeling things, which emotions are happening from which circumstances or thoughts. So you begin to become an observer of being, if you will. You become observer of your mind, and you become an observer of your emotions. And so that's kind of a middle state. And as that middle state grows, where you're not just your stream of thoughts, and you're not just observing your stream of thoughts as like watching a movie, or you're not just observing your emotions attaching to thoughts in other situations, but you're observing it, like, if you will, how is it happening? But you're actually able to inhabit the space of watching. That's kind of a middle domain. Just the awareness that you're not a thought, that you're actually something that can observe a thought. And that you're not actually an emotion, but you're something that can observe an emotion. And that's kind of a nice space because, when you think you're your mind and you have a thought or you have an emotion, like when anger arises, it's kind of a ticket, a free pass to scream and yell at people or to react, punch someone in the face, because you believe you are the emotion. But when awareness inhabits, when you're inhabited by awareness and your thoughts and emotions exist within that awareness, and you're no longer the emotions and thoughts, then you have a choice. It's in a way a kind of a higher level consciousness that can interrupt punching someone in the face, or can interrupt having a verbal fight with someone because you feel the emotion arising. You understand that the series of sentences or even just a phrase is evoking anger in you, for example. That there's kind of the awareness of that allows an opportunity for a pattern interrupt. Or in computer language, we say you throw an exception. And then the control goes back to the operating system, which is the being. And the being observes it instead of attaching to the emotion or attaching to the anger or whatever. And it's able to make a choice instead of a reaction. So you begin to live in choice instead of reaction. And that's kind of the middle stage. And you take responsibility for yourself. Yourself takes responsibility for your mind and your emotions, is another way to say it. You run cooler, you make better decisions. So that's your middle state. And then as the space around mind and as the space around emotion, it increases, almost like a muscle you learn over time that you have choice instead of reaction. The space opens up. And you can almost begin to live in this place of being while your mind speaks and while emotion occurs. You can live in this place of watching. And that's as you begin to live in that space and observe your mind and your emotions as almost like input or ideas or a way of looking at the world, but not the only way of looking at the world. What happens then is you open up to experience. And as that grows in you, you begin to realize that the mind is collecting data from the past, the present, and it's imagining a future, and bad imagined futures it's attaching negative emotions to. And you begin to see how it's all connected. And as you spend more and more time in that watching place of watching mind and watching emotion and seeing how it is related, eventually you'll have a moment, or you might right away. Some people go direct to this stage where the mind stops for a moment or two or an hour or a day or a week or forever. I don't know about forever, but eventually the mind will think again. But where you totally are absorbed in your experience. Instead of inhabiting every wave of thought or emotion that is occurring, you're inhabiting the entire experience of being. You're inhabiting the experience of perception. And so instead of living in, like I'm walking through a park, instead of living in this idea that there's people and trees and colors and these things all have labels, I can live in the actual experience, not of a park, but of the perception I can live in the perception itself without the mind attaching meaning to everything around me. I'm actually living an experience. And that's the, in my opinion, that's the Buddha space, if you will. That is enlightenment. And the word enlightenment is kind of a loaded word. It has a different, all words are loaded because it carries a meaning, and so you have to attach the meaning of enlightenment. All words are like that. There's pure experience, which possibly is what animals are doing to some extent, and then somehow humans ended up with minds, and the mind's kind of a map that we call knowledge. But it turns out all of that knowledge costs a lot in terms of resources for our brain to run that knowledge all the time, and it can be painful when we're attaching emotions. I suspect the pain is there to direct you in the right direction. If you imagine a future scenario based on your knowledge and the past that will go bad if you don't do certain things today, that imagined future that turns out bad will cause pain in you and cause you to do the things the mind believes will keep you out of harm's way. But I think humans have gone to have evolved into the ability to both be in experience and take, if you will, the mind's counsel, or at least have the mind playing out in the background, and without the fear, make good choices. Without the greed, make good choices. Without the 7 deadly sins, if you will, that create all of the attach all the emotions to everything, able to make good decisions. And so but the mind is sort of a primordial. Sorry, I don't have time right now to look that up, but it's a step above animals, but potentially. But it can also be a nightmare. And the mind can convince people in societies that anything's okay, practically. Treating animals terribly, treating each other terribly, it can justify it. And so I think that the next step is sort of experiential. You have to not only see not just the imagines that are negative for you, but the imagines that are negative, period, for the environment or other people. And I think you get that experientially. You experience the consequence of your behavior with empathy, which comes by living not just in mind thought, but in the entire perception of what's so, or your environment. So, and I think it's kind of an evolution. I think in this idea of living an experience, and also while your mind has something to say about it, or at least it's playing in the background, recommending moves, strategies, without your allowing the emotion to attach to it, to do things that might hurt others or yourself. I think it's kind of a next level, if you will. So what it is it's a space, you have to live in a very large space where the wind is the input, and where the ocean is the input, and the earth, and all the living things around you, and your mind is just one of those inputs. And the emotion it wants to attach to your body to get you to act are not attaching in such a way that gets you to react without consideration for the entire experience. So you're able to process the all while you're being selfish, if you will. All right, that's it for today. Hope you're doing well today. Thanks for joining me. This is Dan of Vagabond Buddha.